area that has left unpleasant memories on the mind of most Nigerians is the agriculture sector. The agriculture years in Nigeria have been referred to as a period before independence, when agriculture contributed about 70% to foreign income. At the discovery and consequent boom of oil, the GDP contribution of agriculture fell from a climax of about 60% to about 48% in the 1970s. Now, the downward slide continued till it hit as low as 22% in the 1980s. Now, years later, although the general view is that the glorious days in the agricultural sector is yet to be recaptured, there are recent developments which show signs of hope. The Food and Agriculture Report in 1985 shows that Nigeria produced 18.3 million tons of yam from 1.5 million hectares, representing 73.8% of total yam production in Africa. And that's why the federal government has decided to go into the export of yam.
For us to go abroad and not find Nigerian yams in the market is an embarrassment. And for those who may think that this is not anything significant, we want to assure you it is. Because Ghana is targeting $4 billion a year from yams in the next 3-4 years. And if they can do that, we who are the masters of yam production have no business lagging behind. We don't even consume all the yams we produce here because most of it is lost to wastages because of poor technologies in preservation. We're working on that. We're going to use solar coolers in yam markets and yam producing areas to keep the yam temperature at 14 degrees Celsius, not frozen, but to keep it at that temperature so it can be good all year round and can last 2-3 years in the containers. So essentially, we're making this point because we're diversifying the economy. We're talking about economic recovery and growth. And we will have to export whatever is needed from Nigeria by other countries so we can earn more foreign exchange rather than expend everything we have on importation.
According to the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, Nigeria ranked 16th on the global tomato production scale, accounting for 10.79% of Africa's and 1.2% of total world production of tomatoes. However, an alarming 45% of tomatoes harvested in the country is lost because of poor food chain management.
Not just merely saying go back to the farms to cultivate, but let's look at the entire value chain of different agri-produce. Take, for example, tomato. All right, it is one thing to cultivate and bring out the tomatoes. It's another to process and now possibly can them into purees. And of course, once you can and they are in that form, they can be preserved over time on the shelf. So in which case you prevent the huge waste that we used to experience traditionally. Same thing can happen with the cassava value chain. Okay, produce so much cassava during the season, but instead of having a lot of it rot away, that had happened traditionally and historically, you now have the cassava processed into different, byproducts of it, even onto the cassava peelings, which are also useful for some purposes. So in which case, it is the entire value chains we are now looking at, instead of merely producing so much like we used to do historically. So different investors go into different parts of the value chains. And so storage comes in the picture, processing comes in there. And so ultimately we create a lot more value. And that also plays out in many different ways. Take, for example, if you pick cocoa, just to illustrate, it's a cash crop. Okay? Nigeria still remains one of the top 6 producers in the world, just like in the case of palm oil. All right? But we are no longer in the position we used to occupy in the 60s, in the early 70s, before crude oil came on the scene and made us forget agriculture. So the question then is, how do we extract more value from this agricultural produce? It must go beyond just producing them. We must also bring in processing. But processing requires storage also along the value chain. You need to store to preserve, and then before you process and bring it to the market. That will, of course, will increase the value added. And that equally has employment implications. Because the more activities along the value chains, the more opportunities you have to create jobs.
Apart from private sector investment, Lagos State government has gotten involved with dealing with waste of crops. Consequently, processing and adding value is one of their focus.
We are also taking the bull by the horn. We're already in Erikorodo, we have a poultry processing center there as a government. We also have this coconut processing, mini coconut processing center in Mowo, Badagry. The government is willing to give tax holiday for starters. It's willing to give tax holiday for starters. And the issue of Omonile, has been addressed through our anti-land grabbing task force. There is a law in place. So the era of an investor coming on board, buying land and Omonile disturbing is gone and gone forever. So we're addressing that. So any investor coming on board is assured of peace of mind. It's assured of seamless way of doing business.
I think the youths don't have to be excluded from that area. It's not every youth that can go to, or not every young person that can go to the farms or monitor his farm. You can have a processing plant, you can have a storage plant, but knowing the business behind that is different from the business of agriculture. So yes, but that's also an area that I think a lot of youths would soon wake up to. And I think that would go beyond the local governments. Those are areas I think both the state and federal governments can come in. The state more than the federal government. I believe agriculture should be something that the states should be more involved in. And if it comes to storage and preservation, I think, and processing, I think having state plants, I think I would not want to quote wrongly, but I think there is a state that has offered to buy up crops from farmers. I wouldn't want to say the wrong state, but yes. So some states are already taking that initiative, but it's for more states to do that, so that we can at least we can at least avoid food scarcity.
There are some other factors which have mitigated the expansion of the agricultural sector and increase in food production. One of the factors is limited mechanized farming, which at this time is placed at just about 15%.
You look around, how many tractors do you see really plowing a land? When you talk of mechanization, you're talking of the job that able-bodied men are supposed to do, the tractors are doing it. And what about the farming equipment that we are using? Are they modernized, or we are still using the subsistence farming ways of doing business? So these are the kind of things we are talking of mechanization. If you really want to know a nation that is very serious about mechanization, when you go down through the express road, when you go down through the bush, you will see miles upon miles of this plantation, but we are not having that in Nigeria. And that is why we keep on talking about all this Land Use Act, though the power is vested on every state governors to really monitor the land. But are they really using it to the farmers that really want to go into mechanization? Because when you're talking of mechanization, you are not talking about 5 acres or 10 acres or 15 acres. You're talking about thousands of hectares of land. That way, you'll be able to have a lot of machinery working there and a lot of people being employed in the place. And after that, when you started adding value to what you are doing, that's what they call mechanization, not just producing and exporting it, just like what we do to our oil and gas. All this constituency project that the National Assembly are talking about, they're supposed to take farming in every local government, in all their constituency, take agricultural serious, get a land, get a tractor, get a very hybrid seed, so that people can go into farming, and by the time the farmer produce, mop it up from them, pay them off, they go back to the farm. That way they'll be encouraged.
It's obviously a long discussion when it comes to the dreams and building the Nigeria of our dream. Let's continue the discussion online. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ini John Mekwa.